You're listening to Tech Nest, the Prop Tech Podcast. In each episode, you'll hear from prop tech founders, investors, and industry veterans on how they're using tech to change the way we buy, sell, and invest in real estate. Discover market opportunities, interesting data, growth tactics, and trends driving the industry forward. This isn't just another podcast about making money in real estate. This is about how we live. And now your host, Nate Smoyer.
Wow. That's how I'm going to summarize this episode. If you're just kind of scrolling through and you found TechNest, or this kind of came up as the next episode, do not skip this interview. I've got the CEO and founder of a company called Wander.com, Andrew Entwistle. Wander is vertically integrating the vacation rental space. The short of it is they're creating these experiences as vacation rentals. And while still relatively a small company, but in 18 months, they have done a tremendous amount in building infrastructure. It's not just that they own the properties. It's not just that they've built an app and interface, but they've gone to the extent of incredible automations when you just walk in the door and how it unlocks the door and turns on the fireplace and the lights pop on, and you even unlock your Tesla from your phone. In talking with Andrew about what it means to deliver these types of experiences and what this feels like, and we got into the topic of community, and I never thought that we would get into this topic of comparing and seeing the parallels between iconic brands such as like Harley Davidson and the community they built, and how Wander is going about building community. I'm not saying it's, everybody's wearing leathers and chaps, but it's the emphasis of community. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. Andrew's super bright and has a ton of things going on. He's an experienced founder. He's built and exited a previous startup, and he's taken a lot of that and just pouring all into this new startup. So let's go ahead and hear what he has to say. Hey, Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm super jazzed to be here.
Now, I pointed out... but I want our listeners to know that you and I are both rocking the same sweatshirt, just a slightly different color.
It's true. It is the best attire. Not biased at all. And I think you look very good in it. So
yeah,
throw a compliment at you.
I appreciate that. And as I was saying, like I ride motorcycles. I'm a winter rider. So even out in South Dakota, 30 degrees right now is about my joy cutoff. So any lower than that, the joy starts dropping pretty fast. But above that, it feels good. And this is now one of my go-to layers.
The Wander hoodie is
keeping me on the road.
It's critical. It's critical.
It's solid.
Maybe we'll partner with Harley Davidson or something and get it like.
I'm biased here because I told you I have both a Harley and an Indian. But I think Indian is your brand to go with. And here's why. I'm going to tell you this now, and then we're going to get into all the fun deals. But I'm going to go into this for real quick. If you look at commercials, movies, TV shows, Indian has been the brand being shown in all of it lately. And they're actually owned, the brand is owned by Polaris. They bought it and brought it back and to fund the manufacturing of those motorcycles. They shut down the Victory brand, which is what basically was a testing pool. And now it's dominant. They are fast growing and a serious threat to Harley, but there's just such a different feel to those bikes. They're just
I'll have to I've never ridden an Indian. I used to have a Harley Fat Bob, which I had to sell because I was far too reckless. But listen, I'm up for proposals. So
there it is.
We'll see which brand comes first.
We'll send out a tweet and see who responds. Well, before we go too far down that rabbit hole, and I promised you in pre-show there's going to be some rabbit holes, please go ahead, introduce yourself, let everyone know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Andrew Entwistle. I am 25 years young, born in New York, currently in Austin, Texas. I'm the founder and CEO of Wander, which is a startup basically taking on the vacation rental space. You can kind of think about it like Airbnb, but we own all the homes and all the craziness that comes with that dynamic.
All right. So in comparison, 25 years old, I was actually still in college. It's not because I was that slow. Okay. Was I 20? I actually might have been a year out or almost a year out. I went to school very late. You are running a company that's raised, 32 million now?
Yep, that's correct.
And then you have a secure line of financing to be able to go and acquire homes on top of that, right?
Yep, yeah, $100 million facility from Credit
small
Suisse.
amount, 100 million. Okay, all right. and you guys are putting together these. I call them experiences. I can't call them vacation rentals. Vacation rentals is the homes that I can see from my house, but these are experiences that genuinely is setting a new bar in the vacation rental space. How in the world did you position yourself to be doing this? And the company's 18 months, 20 months old?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I love how you positioned it around experiences, because ultimately you have to think backwards from what the customer is actually buying, right? They're not buying a house, like they're buying an experience. And so that's really how we think about everything, right? Which is really why we started this company. I mean, how many of us have gone and rented a home and it been subpar, right? Doesn't look like the photos, beds aren't comfortable, internet's bad. I mean, that's a regular occurrence. And then obviously you get the much worse horror stories, which I'm not even going to get into. And so this idea for Wander was really around, what if you could pull an Apple and own the hardware and the software, right? What if you could own the booking platform, the property management, and then the underlying assets themselves? And if you could verticalize this, that you could take this radically fragmented industry and provide a much better customer experience. It's like that Keith Boyce quote where it's take a fragmented low NPS industry, verticalize it, and provide a better experience for customers. And so, yeah, I mean, that really is the core ethos of the company, is all around providing the best experience for customers and building as much infrastructure around that as possible.
Very cool. I shared a little bit before the call, but like super impressed that, I mean, where you're at such a young age. What were you doing before Wander that, led to this, or specifically, like, what was the catalyst? Was it that bad an experience, or did you have that good an experience?
Well, before Wander, I'd started a company called Coder with my co-founders, Kyle and Lamar. Really incredible business. Basically, it moves the development environment where a software engineer writes code to an organization's cloud infrastructure. So started that with them out of high school. So we were all 17, 18 at the time. And that company ended up being pretty successful. We raised about $45 million from a bunch of great VCs, a bunch of great customers as well, like Goldman Sachs, Palantir, et cetera. So I ran that company as CEO for the last 5-ish years. And then somewhere in between became a Teal Fellow and 30 under 30 and all that tech jargon. And yeah, when I had stepped down as CEO, my co-founder stepped into the role. I knew that I wanted to build another company. And I think, like so many people, when you're going through a change in your life, you kind of turn to, exploring the world or getting out. And that's when I rented this cabin out in Colorado. And, I had experienced like a lack of quality and consistency dozens of times. But this was the first time in my life where my brain was empty and still running 1 million miles a minute. And so the idea for Wander got written in my notebook. But what was interesting is that it just wouldn't let me sleep at night. And I ended up spending probably 3 months, give or take, just ideating, trying to figure out if this would work, why it would die, what the strategy would be, what are the players in the space. And ultimately, it got to the point where I couldn't help but pull the trigger. So started the company in May 2021. Fortunate that all of Coder's investors were keen to work with me again. Most incredible folks in the world. And so we raised about $8 million across a bunch of little seed rounds that was mostly led by Redpoint. yeah, got to work, built the booking platform and the property management, and we bought our first assets, and just trying to understand if this was actually going to work, because odds are that it wouldn't. And people just reacted in a really beautiful way. I think this was something that a lot of people wanted and were excited for, and they could really feel the soul behind it as well. I mean, I always say that this is the company I want to work on for the rest of my life. And so it just feels different when you kind of look at it through that lens. So yeah, that was my journey before Wander. So very unrelated to hospitality, but very related, obviously, to company building.
But totally related to my next question, because this is the Prop Tech podcast. So naturally, I gotta know, like, how do you describe, when you describe Wander, or with people put you in this position of like, are you guys a real estate company? Are you a tech company? Is there another category? Like, how do you respond to that question?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is I don't care at all what category people put us in. All I care is that we're giving the best experience to customers. And at the end of the day, the business's purpose is to facilitate that. So people can call us a technology company, they can call us an asset manager, they can call us a prop tech company or a real estate company. I candidly couldn't care less. The most important thing is that people have a great experience and that the business does well.
Let's talk about the experience. So we mentioned, like I said, like from the outside looking in full disclosure, I've not stayed at a Wander. It's one of these days. It'll happen. I just have to leave my little cocoon in South Dakota. But
maybe we'll come to you,
Yeah, I'll give you reasons after the show as to why that's a great idea for you. But, so what is it about these experiences? What makes this property an experience versus, I just check in, check out, there's a property manager who tells me when I can be there and that sort of thing. I'm assuming, and I think I saw something recently from you guys, the chore list is a little shorter than the average chore list. If I'm renting my friend's Aunt Susie's cabin, near a national park, like, walk me through here more on the experience side of the property that sets it apart from your standard vacation rental.
Yeah. So I think probably the best way to take a listener is probably through the general customer journey.
Let's do it.
So you would have discovered Wander probably via like some social media, or maybe a friend told you about a trip, or maybe you listened to this podcast. You go and download the Wander app, and it becomes pretty apparent that this is like a little bit different than like Airbnb or otherwise, because we take great care into the properties that we add onto the platform. Mm-hmm. Think, modern glass houses above a 180-foot cliff, or this net zero home on the coast of Oregon. Just these really beautiful locations that sort of invoke some type of emotion, like some type of like, I want to go here and experience this. Once you select dates and book, which of course you can split with friends and a bunch of cool stuff, that's where the experience really starts to differ. So the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to be reached out to by concierge. Make sure that you have everything you need. Your booking instructions and otherwise are obviously right in the app, and then you have guides around the local area and all that sort of fun stuff. And you'll notice this little tab that's disabled, but it says the smart home control, which is a really beautiful part of the experience. So when you arrive at one of these properties, you'll arrive and you'll see the Wander sign, and that's sort of how you'll know that it's just a little bit different. All the lights will be on, and you'll hear this low thumping, because on check-in, automatically all the lights turn on, the music turns on, the fire pits turn on, and it makes you feel welcome, right? Because how many of us arrive at a vacation rental and you feel like you're breaking in?
You got to walk around and figure out how to turn the things on, and you're like holding laminate sheets and like following long lists of just instructions on turn it on, but don't turn it on this way.
Yeah, and it's just not a welcoming experience, right? Mm-hmm. It's just super foreign and uncomfortable. When you get up to the door, you can obviously unlock the door right through the Wander app. And then from there, the whole house is obviously designed for you. There's no owner's closet or photos of grandchildren or anything like that. And there's all types of little touches like drinks and snacks and Wander branded robes and linens, and obviously everything's clean to hotel standards, and you can go and book a private chef through concierge or otherwise, or unlock the Tesla and go take it for a rip, or whatever you want to do. So really, I think it's mostly around doing things that other folks can't, around these little touches and integrations. Like, can we add a Wander sign? Can we add a Tesla in the garage? Can we have the house controlled through the Wander app? Like, all these little touches. But at the end of the day, the experience just has to be solid, right? Like, if you break a glass, like, is it going to be problematic? Like, no. Like, it's fine. We understand these things happen, et cetera. It's not some family heirloom. Not saying that our guests should go and try and break glasses. Would appreciate if they didn't. But it's just knowing that, like, we're here to serve you and to make you happy, and so you have a great time. And, knowing that that's like the entire goal of the company that's providing this experience for you. It just, it just feels different versus like someone trying to cover like a mortgage or something.
Out of curiosity, do you guys just go out and get the Tesla and park it in the garage, or is that part of the experience of like working with Tesla and like, hey, we're going to get you in on these homes, and it's like kind of, because they're famous for not doing a lot of advertising, Elon is the marketing department, I think, for a large majority.
So Tesla, they're like the most incredible people. And what they actually did is they gave us special access to their API so that users could unlock the door and all that sort of stuff right through the Wander app.
That's so cool.
It's just like, for such a tiny company, like the engineers and the people at Tesla, were just way too kind to us. So shout out to those folks, because obviously companies are just groups of people, and they have some pretty amazing people.
All right, I'm going to insert my own idea here, though, but there's got to be like a Wander song and dance for the Tesla, right?
Ooh, I don't know if we can convince them to add that.
They do they do the Christmas, like the Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
It's true. I've seen it.
Yeah. So, hey, I don't know. It's all possible. It's all there. So, I want to talk a little bit about, speaking of like, well, we said Elon, and I'm going to just speak about Twitter. It's not always common. Sometimes we see CEOs have like very public profile. Sometimes they're like very behind the scenes. I've noticed, and this is just part of me, I'm a bit of a nerd like this, following prop tech companies and prop tech CEOs. And I've noticed like an increase from you, like getting out there, talking to people, being visible on Twitter, like in front. Is there a reason behind that? Like, was there a change? So like, hey, I got to get out there. I got to talk to people. Did the marketing department kind of push you? Like, John Andrew, people want to hear from you. The people are asking for your voice. Like, what's been behind that?
Well, it's interesting. So my previous company was obviously enterprise software developer tools. So not exactly like super hype.
Right.
Though obviously like the developer community is actually super active on social media and otherwise. But when I started Wander, and when you're starting from nothing, you have no distribution. You have no idea if people want what you're doing. And so you really don't have a choice but to just like broadcast like, hey, we're building this. Like, does anyone actually want it? Or is it interesting? Do you hate it? Why do you hate it? I mean, obviously Wander has its like, we actually don't have that many haters, which is surprising, but there's certainly a few folks who like, don't like the idea for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's important to engage with those people too, especially in the early stages, right? It's like, why don't you like it? Is there something we should change, et cetera? And that's actually happened a few times where like there's some like problem with the UX, or like when we originally launched, viewing dates was blocked by like having to become a Wander member, and like we changed those dynamics, et cetera. So I think it's actually really important to engage with people who dislike it just as much as it is to engage with people who do. But I mean, candidly, it's really just because like I'm having fun, like talking with people who are excited and have ideas. And I think that like typically building a company as a founder can be relatively lonely. And so getting to like chat with and share your excitement with other people who are just as excited about it is a really beautiful phenomenon. So yeah, definitely not orchestrated by marketing or much strategy other than the fact that I'm just having fun talking to users.
I'd love to hear that from more people in the space, whether founder, CEO, just in general, like having fun with it. I mean, it seems like that should be a part of your job. Like, I don't know. You spend a lot of time doing it. Like, why be miserable? Like, it should be. It should be a lot of fun. But it's encouraging to hear it.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of a choice almost. Because obviously, again, like as a founder building a company, there are all types of shenanigans that happen. And there are a lot of shenanigans too that I think would like make people very stressed out. But you kind of have to, decide like what attitude you're going to have around these problems.
Yeah.
And like we have a virtue at Wander, which is we love problems because it means we get to solve them. And I think that that's just critical, both like personally and professionally, to sort of meet adversity with a can-do attitude, so to speak.
Very cool, man. I want to let's talk about the properties. Where are they? How many you guys have right now? And which is the first? Which is your favorite?
Yeah. So it's a relatively small number. We have, I think, 14-ish locations. Hopefully should be around 50 by the end of the year. So growing quite a bit. Our first was Anchor Bay. So Gualala is a small town about 2.5 hours north of San Francisco. It's a really, really beautiful location. Northern California coast is one of my favorite places on earth. Mm-hmm. And the property was just incredibly special. I mean, we had just started the company. I'd gone on this road trip with my pop where I was basically working in the passenger seat on my laptop and he was driving. So great bonding time with my dad. And we came to this property, the most amazing owners, who also own the home next door, and just 5 acres on the California coast, truly magical. You had pelicans flying by, and because it's a cliff, the pelicans fly at eye level. So you stand on the cliff and the pelicans fly by right in front of you. And when there's a wind gust, the pelicans actually just hover there. Mm-hmm. And you can like literally reach out and touch them, along with seeing whales and seals and all these other incredible things. Mm. So that was the first location. And what was really important about that is that it was about proving a thesis, right? So at that point in parallel, the booking platform was happening. We had to establish property management and operations because that was obviously critical to this whole thesis. We had to ensure that our underwriting was correct because at the end of the day, these were going to become investable assets. Right. And to watch everything come together so quickly and to have that first guest check in and say like, wow, this is a remarkable experience. We sort of knew that we were on to something. So yeah, that was the first property. And yeah, just one of my favorite places on earth. If you live in like the San Francisco Bay Area and you need to get away for a few days, I highly recommend it.
There it is. I tend to agree with you. The Northern California coast.
It's incredible.
That's what we did for our honeymoon. We drove from north of Seattle and we just did the whole coastline down in California and we stayed on the coast the whole way. Yeah. And it was just like constant every day. Like how is this real? How does this exist? It looks like you're in like, was it Land Before the Lost? Was that what it was called? The old dinosaur cartoon show? It might have been before your time. I was kind of young when it was on TV. But anyway, not to go down that path. So you talked about these properties becoming investable assets. And so, of course, yeah, your investors having a share. But you guys have spun off a new service, if you will, or a new product altogether, a financial product tied to these properties, right? Can you talk us through what is that called? What is it? And also, like, why? You're even just getting started on the actual homes themselves. Why add this other arm to the business?
Yeah. So when you look at the industry, basically what you have is 3 fragmented components. So you have the booking platforms, think Airbnb, VRBO. Then you have the property managers, think Vacasa, Evolve, and then obviously there's a bunch of local companies as well. And then you have the asset managers, right? Which in this case are just individual owners. So it's all hyper fragmented, and you have these three core components. So when you think about how you would go about verticalizing the industry, you have to obviously basically create your own OTA, online travel agency, your own distribution platform, booking platform. Then you have to have your own property manager. And then underneath that, you need to be the owner. When you think about that and you just kind of do some backwards math on scale, it's just not possible for Wander to have 100% of the equity in 1,000 properties. And so what you end up realizing, of course, is that, finance is the other side of real estate, and it starts to look a lot like a traditional hospitality model where you have the property owner and then you have obviously the operator. And so the question was, how can we allow for basically the community to also own a piece of this portfolio as opposed to just large institutions, for example? And that's really where the idea for the Wander REIT really kicked in, was this idea of what if we could allow for investors to have access to this really incredible new asset category that has, historically really incredible yields and, is being professionally managed and otherwise. And the barrier to entry really is go and buy a second home and then rent it out, which is a pretty high barrier to entry. And how can we do so in the most tax efficient and best way for consumers? Which, if you kind of look at the alternative investing space, candidly, it's really inefficient. If you actually look at a lot of these Reg A filings, 50% goes to fees or otherwise. And so if you're investing in one-off Reg A filings in real estate where those returns really matter, it's just grossly inefficient, not to mention taxes and otherwise. So to me, the idea of a REIT was sort of the only one that worked, right? Where Wander would carry the burden and the expense load of, getting everything set up and making sure that it was ironclad, and also in a tax advantage structure for individuals. I think it's something like 35% of the taxes is deductible or something like that. But I'm not a tax advisor, so someone should.
None of this is tax or legal advice. Please consult someone who's
Yeah,
able
exactly.
to help you.
But yeah, so that was the big idea behind it. And we also saw this incredible flywheel opportunity where someone stays at the property and can own a piece of it. And that leads to more locations. More locations leads to more guests. More guests lead to more investors. And you had this beautiful flywheel. You also had this flywheel of investors coming to Wander, just wanting to invest in the product because it's just so attractive and in their investment thesis, and then stay at the properties. And so over time, what we're really excited to do is basically merge this idea of a customer and an owner, where you can own a piece of the REIT, get access to things like special dates, et cetera, and really feel ownership of this portfolio while also benefiting from the returns and otherwise. And so, yeah, really at the end of the day, it solved a business problem while also making the whole ecosystem, I think, just really strategically beautiful. Of course, it is a model that's been around since, I think, the 70s, right? When REITs started to become pretty prolific. But it's interesting to take a consumer brand and this technology platform and overlay it with this well-known financial structure and really merge all the concepts.
Yeah, and that was one of my follow-ups here is do you see this as a vehicle for, the customers become the investors, or investors then become lifelong customers? Because I could see very clearly persona overlaps of, who may be attracted to, can I call it upscale? Do you call it upscale?
Yeah, I would say upscale.
Yeah, an upscale rental experience. I want to go away, but I want to have the amenities where they're at. I want things taken care of. Well, it's very possible they would qualify to be able to invest in this. And also those who qualify to invest in this may also appreciate, those experiences at level. It seems like there'd be that give and take, which then it's to me is the obvious piece, whereas that's part of the community. Is there something else that you guys are doing that then is uniting that community like, are they interacting with each other somehow? Is there a way of like bringing that around to where different wanderers, do you call them that? Is there customers, the wanderers?
We don't. Well, I don't, just because I feel like I'd be like crucified for it being too corny. But I'd be lying if I said that I didn't absolutely love it when people said it. I just know that I have lost the privilege to say it because it would be deemed too corny to come out of my mouth. But when other people say it, I do love it. So,
but I'm wondering if there's more, or if not today, is there a vision of like what that community entails, other than because we've stayed at a Wander or we invest in Wander, then we're part of a community. And I'll follow up this question with, because I see a lot of talk about community.
yeah.
Like join the community and be part of the community, but genuinely it just means I have an account.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I think that a lot of people screw up what the idea of a community is. Like you can't, like a lot of companies will launch a product and then like just put together a Discord or something like that. And not saying that that's bad, but what you want to do is you want to foster a group of people who are excited about an idea, right? I give a good example like Apple. Apple has a incredibly strong community. So does Tesla. But the groups who are excited about that, there's not some like built-in corporate feature that allows like Tesla owners to like chat with each other on the road or something like that. And the reason is because I think that a community is actually just a group of people who are truly excited and passionate about an idea. What you want to do from there, I think, is that you just don't want to let that community down. I think that's actually the best form of community engagement, is to deliver on your promises. And so over time, we do want to allow sort of this like beautiful, like drifting interaction where people will be able to leave recommendations when they go on a stay, and then someone else can review it. And like, I think that's like a really like romantic idea. But I think that if we tried to force something where we just put everyone who's excited about Wander into some like group chat, that it wouldn't, I guess I would say that it wouldn't make up for if we failed to deliver on the brand promise. And so really, I think it's more about delivering, engaging, welcoming people, accepting their ideas, and maybe we can create some interactions that make sense. But I think that's actually much more critical than trying to force some like cross community interactions.
Yeah. I've joined enough Facebook groups where they give me the canned questions to answer, and I answer those questions, and then nothing happens. And it's hard to call that a genuine community. It's more like a bulletin board for the admin, and then that's kind of all it
it's
becomes.
like it's all based around this idea of excitement, right? It's like what you want in a community is you want to be excited about something, and then you want to see that thing deliver and grow. And like it's interesting, like I like pre-ordered the Cybertruck when it was announced, just because I thought it was like super cool concept. And it's interesting, like now I feel like I'm part of this Cybertruck community.
Totally.
But there's no group chats, there's no anything. There's just like YouTube videos and like the occasional tweets and like whatever. And it's like I feel just as like it's just an interesting concept. I think a lot of people get the idea of community very wrong.
I ride motorcycles, and what do bikers do a lot of times when they pace each other? A lot of people confuse it with a wave, but it's usually two fingers, and they point down at the ground, and it's two tires, rubber side down. Stay on your wheels, stay safe, enjoy the ride. Like there's that camaraderie there. I used to own a 74 Beetle. It was all matte black, red rims, chrome accents. It was low and slow and not much else. But every time I rode past or drove past another Volkswagen owner, and specifically Beetles, like it was other Beetle owners, they do the same thing, but they would do a peace sign because that's the V, Volkswagen, right? And Jeep owners, of course, I'm not even going to get into the Jeep topic. Jeep people are a whole kind of special breed. They're little. It's a Jeep thing you wouldn't understand. And yes, I wouldn't understand why you want someone with a leaky transmission, but that is a different discussion. But
controversial topics here.
I see what you're saying. Like, it's a belief in an idea that can unite people, and there's not necessarily a dedicated forum to like bring all those people together, and yet somehow that is there, that exists.
I think it's also about the underlying ethos of it all, right? It's like, it's not just about like the property or the company. It's about this idea of like, what type of person are you? Like, do you want to go on these adventures? Do you want to explore the world? And then like fostering that. And again, I think as long as a product delivers on its brand promise, that's how you create that idea. I think the reason why you don't have it for companies like the airlines, for example, is that like, yeah, airlines could be this really exciting, passionate community around people who love to travel and otherwise, until you hop on the phone with United support or otherwise, and like you got booted off your flight, and I have to spend the night at the airport, and they don't care about you, and like that is what ruins the experience. And so as long as a brand delivers on its promise, and if you can do so over decades, then you can create a credible community, which I think like there are very few that did, right? I think Apple would be an example. Like, they've delivered on their promise of bringing great technology to groups of people for the last 40 years. I think that, Harley Davidson, I mean, they've struggled a little bit, not always delivering on the promise, but like that idea of freedom and like being on the road, and like if you can deliver your brand promise year after year and keep people excited, then you end up building a community without ever having to create a chat room or Facebook group or otherwise.
I literally, when I talked about this sweatshirt being like a base layer for how I stay out on the road when riding, I did not give genuinely any thought to how communities that exist that I'm very familiar with and know in the motorcycle world to what you guys are building. But as we're talking here, I'm like, it is blowing my mind because I'm seeing so many parallels. Like, I know a lot of people who, my dad had multiple Harley tattoos. I mean, the brand tattooed on you, that's like the ultimate achievement of a brand.
I mean, like, I don't think I've ever showed it before, but I have the Wander logo right on my,
look at
right
that.
on my wrist.
That's sharp. Are there benefits for Wander community members who have Wander tattoos?
I don't think I could ever do that. I don't think I could ever encourage
at least a retweet. If you've got a Wander tattoo, tweet it out.
Please do not get a tattoo unless you really want one. And I'm not saying that I won't retweet it. I'm just saying that I don't advise it.
Don't advise it. Fair enough.
Yeah, a little lunacy, but
no, I think it's cool. I mean, if it's a company you plan on working on for the rest of your life, then it makes sense to to do something, to make that little mark. If it's very personal to you and it connects to you, why
yeah, it's also, I think, a really like, just our logo is a very it's just a globe, right?
Yeah,
and like the globe is our home, and we're all on it. We all share it. Like, very few of us are going to go anywhere off of it anytime soon. So
true. Well, we're going to shift to this is a little bit of a freestyle segment of the show. Every once in a while, I'll do this, and I'll source questions from other people I know, either in the industry, Twitter, some channels that I'm in that are like not all public. And we got one from Twitter, Seth Samowitz. Seth Samowitz. And Seth wants to know, how are they thinking about markets to enter and market saturation? Follow up, are we in the first or ninth inning of short-term rentals?
Yeah. So it's really interesting. So it's kind of a boring answer that like all of the markets that Wander chooses are actually data-driven. So we have these sort of like large data sets where we analyze occupancy, seasonality, rental rates, all this performance data down to the zip code and address. And that basically gives us a heat map of which areas we can focus in. And then on top of that, we outline, user data and travel trends and, property level data and appreciation, all this like boring, non-fun stuff. But then it also does get overlaid with the fun stuff as well. Like, is it beautiful? and isn't inspiring and isn't a place that we actually want to go, etc. Which I actually think a lot of folks forget, that like a house needs to underwrite and it needs to be a place you want to go. Like you can't just buy a place that underwrites, and obviously you can't just buy a place that is beautiful. It's like both need to be true if you want to create a durable asset. Mm-hmm. So that's how we select our markets. In terms of what inning we're in, I think that it's all around what thesis you have on the industry. So if you look at the institutionalization of single family rentals, it originally started with obviously like individual investors, right? So an investor would go buy a property, rent it out. And over time, as institutions recognized the benefit of the asset category, there was institutional investment into the space. What really never happened was this idea of a cohesive brand on top of these locations, which I think makes sense, right? Someone just is renting a house. It's not like hospitality or otherwise. So I think that to that end, the phase that we're now at with short-term rentals is you're starting to see institutional investment and interest. And obviously companies like Wander are sort of like opening that world, right? With, facilities like what we have with Credit Suisse and otherwise. But the idea of putting a brand on top of it and consistency ends up looking a lot like a distributed hotel model. And in that sense, that's really like the absolute first inning. As you can imagine, hundreds, thousands of locations with a consistent brand and experience. And then in the same way you think about Marriott or Hilton or Ritz-Carlton or Four Seasons, that dynamic is going to extend into this distributed hotel type concept. And I think the way that you know that we're in that phase is that no one actually knows what to call the category. So like when I was starting Coder, right? Like you just had like DevOps, and then you had like DevSecOps, and you had like all these acronyms like flying around, people calling things various things. And like no one knew what to call like what was happening in the industry. And I think the same thing is happening within short-term rentals as well, right? You have short-term rentals, vacation rentals, single family leisure is now something that some people are starting to call it.
I've heard more of the leisure hospitality lingo floating around that, but referencing short-term rental, single family rental.
Exactly.
For vacation. Yeah.
And so I think that when you think about it through that lens and this idea of like a distributed hotel type idea, that it is like literally the earliest. I wouldn't even say it's inning number one. I'd say it's inning number one when a company like Wander announces a large institutional equity facility. That's like when it'll really be, or like when our REIT passes like $100 million AUM or something along those lines, then it's, then you're sort of entering like inning 1, 2, and then globally, obviously. I mean, it's a global market. So when you think about it through that lens, I'd say it's the beginning. I think when you think about it through just like the individual owner operator, that you're probably halfway through the game. If I had to guess, it's becoming a pretty established market.
Gotcha. And you said something in there that kind of made me think about, we had Austin Allison, the CEO of Picasso, on the show, and they talked about certain qualities of, properties they look for that kind of fit, and which is a perfect segue to the next question. It comes from Clayton Collins. He's CEO of HW Media. They run Housing Wire, Real Trends. And he wants to know if you see, luxury vacation rentals, this experience that you guys are doing, is there competition against the luxury fractional audience, like those buying a Picasso home, or do you see it as they coexist without competition?
Yeah. I mean, the competitive question, I think, always boils down to like consumer choice, right? So a consumer is either going to decide that they want to go and stay at a vacation rental like Wander, or they're going to decide that they want to own a fractional share, or they may decide that they want to go and own their own vacation home and rent it out, or whatever it may be. And so when you think about it from that perspective, I don't necessarily think that like once a customer has made their choice, that obviously Wander is competitive in those categories because it's just a different product. I do think though that like as customers think about what they want to do, they're obviously going to evaluate a slate of options. And so the more options that a consumer is given, you may get obviously like some changes in what they decide to do. And that can also, again, not just be related to renting a home versus buying fractional, but it's also, again, just going and buying a whole vacation home, or they could also decide to go and stay at a resort or whatever it may look like. Which at the end of the day is why it's just critical to deliver the best customer experience possible and deliver something that you think makes sense. And at the end of the day, I think it's going to be that like a certain set of customers just want to go and rent. And then I think there's going to be a certain set of customers that want to own a fractional share or whatever that looks like. So I think ultimately at the end of the day, it's actually, I don't think the two are going to end up displacing each other, candidly.
Very cool. And then we'll do the final of the three here. I did have one other actually from my CEO, Ryan Letsizer at Obi, but I asked it earlier as far as differentiations. So this last one here is going to be from Drew Myers. He runs a community for prop tech leaders, founders. You know Drew from PK State. Drew. All right, so Drew's got a question for you. How do you look at retrofitting existing houses versus building from scratch?
Yeah. So part of what makes this product like somewhat scalable is the idea that Wander can go and roll up existing assets, existing incredible homes, existing incredible short-term rentals, etc., and then put our brand and operations on them and make it just a better guest experience. So if that was the question, as long as I'm understanding it correctly, you're really taking advantage of existing homes is sort of critical versus like build to rent. If he means in terms of like building our own smart home tech and otherwise, it's really all around the integration side. We don't have any plans to displace Yale or anyone like that anytime soon.
All right. Well, John Andrew, we're going to transition to the bottom of the show. We're going to jump into the segment called For the Future. For the Future, when I get to ask each guest who comes on the show to give their best predictions based on the following 4 questions. Are you ready to play?
I am. I will warn you, I am an optimist, so all my answers are going to be optimistic.
Let's do it. I love it. Number 1, what does Wander look like 1 year from now?
Oof, a year? I would say that there's actually pretty solid clarity. We'll probably be about 50-ish locations. We'll have launched our first international location, likely in Europe or Iceland. Haven't decided. We'll have closed our first institutional equity round. The REIT will have been merged into the app and may at that point be registered as a public security, non-listed, but a public security. So anyone can go and invest, and there'll be obviously no minimums. It's also really nice too, because there's all these filing requirements, which I think is like a really beautiful thing. It's just to give that as much transparency as possible. So yeah, that'll likely be registered at that point. There is a product which we will be releasing this summer that I can't share yet, but that will be live. And I think pretty incredible and exciting to specifically other short-term rental operators. So it's gonna shake up the landscape quite a bit. And yeah, at that point too, hopefully Wander is a profitable business, which, knock on wood, if everything goes according to our capital plan, we will be at the time, and we'll likely have raised our Series B, and yeah, hopefully we'll just have continued to do well by our customers as well, and delivered a heck of a lot of happiness. Because that's really the thing that like keeps me running is, just getting the occasional email that's like, I had the time of my life. Like, thank you so much. So hopefully a lot more of those.
Love it. Number 2 here, and I tried to put something together that was going to be impossible to answer. But you're so optimistic. I feel like you're going to make it sound easy. If you had to put a % of growth to the overall vacation rental space, let's just U.S. We'll stick to U.S. if that makes it simpler. And this is not including hotels. I know we just talked about the convergence of all that, right? So vacation homes, kind of thing. How much will the industry grow over the next 3 to 5 years?
So I think that there will be a growth of professional operators. But I do think there will end up being a contraction of sort of like folks just dipping their toes into the market, because obviously it is a lot of work. I do think you'll see growth as well on the software side, different property management softwares, payment solutions, insurance solutions, direct booking solutions, etc. So you're going to see a lot of technology growth. You're going to see capital infusion from institutional players. You're going to see, if I had to guess, like a few competitors in this, distributed hotel type branded idea. So you're going to see growth in a lot of different areas, but I do think you are going to end up seeing some level of contraction of individual operators. But that actually may not necessarily be the case either, as more people are looking to make a few bucks and short-term rentals become sort of better understood, and you have wild investment from companies like Airbnb and otherwise to drive more people hosting. Mm-hmm. So it would be tough. I would say probably flat growth, maybe a little bit of growth in terms of like overall listings, unless you get into the category of like these buildings who are signing agreements where you can short-term rent the apartments. That's going to lead to quite a lot of listings, obviously. So yeah, I would say moderate to flat growth overall, and then I'd say a lot of growth in the professional operator space and a lot of growth in the overall technology and investment space, and then the first infusion of institutional capital.
All right. Number 3 of For the Future, what's one industry trend you think will continue but you wish would go away?
Probably the competitiveness of operators. Like there's it's super fascinating, right? So like in startup land, like founders just recognize that it's super hard, and we're like just all rooting for each other not to die. Like we're like, just keep going, dude. Like you can make it, like, or otherwise. But for some reason there's like this competitiveness within like the short-term rental and like hospitality world, which I find like super fascinating. Like everyone's always trying to get an edge. So yeah, I would say like that competitiveness, and like not rooting for each other is probably what I think will continue just culturally. I'm not really sure why it exists in this like real estate world. But I wish it wouldn't. I mean, it'd be so much more fun if everyone was like rooting for each other and, sort of recognize that like, if you execute, a rising tide lifts all boats. So yeah, I would say that's probably the big shift, is like more optimism, more excitement, more camaraderie, everyone rooting for each other, etc.
Very cool. All right, the last one on For the Future. What's one thing you believe will dramatically change or fade away in real estate as a result of tech advances?
Fade away in all of real estate. Gosh.
It could be one segment, or totally it's through your lens.
No, I mean it's a great question. So I want to respect it with a somewhat decent answer. I think that there's been this within real estate funds specifically, there's a lot of sort of like garbage collection of assets, where you have these like large real estate funds and they invest in really just like anything that satisfies like their cap rate requirements, even if the actual asset isn't necessarily quality. And I think what that leads to is a lot of distrust of investors, because they don't actually know what they're investing in. And I think that dynamic is shifting. I think what's going to end up happening is there going to be more high quality niche real estate funds, or the assets that are inside of them are very well known and something that investors really look at. And I think that firms or groups that try and throw anything that moves or a bunch of junk that underwrites into these funds are going to fail, especially as the macro starts to contract and real estate investors are sort of, dotting their I's and crossing their T's and checking twice in terms of where they're going to deploy capital. So I think that's going to apply to the entire industry.
All right. John, we've got 3 more questions for you. Excuse me, John, Andrew, 3 last questions for you. These are all about you personally, so our listeners get to know you just a bit better. First one is, what are you reading?
Well, the book of the month for Wander this month is Extreme Ownership.
Jocko.
I have read it already. I'm reading it a second time. The Wander Book Club is actually pretty intense. Books like Can't Hurt Me, Deep Work, etc. So you're all about like getting shit done, being tough, executing as a team, etc. So yeah, I would say that those are the books that I really enjoy. I'm also reading a lot of books on like general, just general structuring within real estate and otherwise. And then the one other boring answer is I've gotten very into chess recently. So I've read a few chess books, which is a boring answer, but trying to get slightly better.
Now, I am curious. You guys went through Can't Hurt Me, which is a phenomenal book. And I will say, in a moment of like transparency, it is one of and if not the only book that I could say like brought tears reading the beginning of that book. But how many of you guys went through and did the Goggins challenge?
So everyone in the company had to read the book. In terms of how many people did the challenge, I would say obviously a small fraction, unfortunately. But the whole company
read the book. I was hoping to hear more about like you guys got the nicest swag. I was like, I wanted to hear about like whoever does the challenge gets like a tracksuit, like a Wander tracksuit. That'd be pretty dope. But all good. Number 2, who are you learning from?
The one last thing I'll note on the book piece is you can imagine a team of like 40 people who are all reading Can't Hurt Me at the same time, working on the same idea. It was an epic month, dude. It was just so much fun.
I love that.
Yeah, it was great energy. Who am I learning from right now? Gosh, I try and learn from everyone, candidly. That's sort of how I approach it. Like every interaction I have is like, what can I learn from this person? So yeah, I mean, the candid answer is I'm sort of that kid who, I know on podcasts I talk a lot because I'm asked a bunch of questions. But I'm the type of kid who like, I'll sit at a dinner table and just listen to everyone for, an hour and then pop up with a bunch of questions at the end. So I may seem like an extrovert, but I am not. So
that's why we put you in the hot seat. All right. The last one here. What inspires you?
Gosh. Honestly, I just creating a better world, which I know is like the most like hand wavy, like founder BS ever. But yeah, dude, I'm just such an optimist. I mentally like when I read the news, there's so many negative stories, and I purposely hunt for like that one beautiful tale, right? Like the baby that survives the rubble in Turkey, or like just like whatever I can find and grab onto that just like makes me smile, which is a principle. There's a book that I highly recommend called The Art of Happiness. And it's the principle that like I really recommend sort of like searching out the good in the world and the good in others and trying to progress and make things better. So yeah, that's what inspires me, is the idea of just like a better like outcome for the world, right? Like, less war and more peace and more economic prosperity and all that sort of stuff, which I know makes me sound rather hippie. But yeah, I just choose to believe in a better future. So yeah.
That's awesome. John, Andrew, this has been a lot of fun. I greatly appreciate your time and entertaining multiple rabbit holes, but also I'm struck by the theme of community that came through. This was not the intention and plan, but stuff happens. Speaking of community, for those who want to learn more about Wander and or get in touch with you, where do they go and how do they do that?
Yeah, so just go to wander.com. And you can follow us too on any socials. It's just @Wander. And yeah, take a look at the properties, check out the products. And yeah, if you need anything, just hit us up, hello@Wander, and we'll answer anything. So
Awesome. Good stuff. We'll see you around.
wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to TechNest, the PropTech podcast. Find all the links and resources mentioned in this episode on technest.io. You can get future episodes delivered to your ears directly by subscribing to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all other major podcast apps. Follow TechNest on social media to stay up to speed on new developments, resources, and announcements in PropTech. Your support is greatly appreciated. There's 2 ways you can directly support this podcast. Share episodes you find interesting, and then leave a review of the show in the App Store. From Nate and the TechNest team, thanks for listening.